I think
Jesus. All right.
I think it brings us to like we have a couple of topics here we can discuss.
Please,
And
help me.
we've
Help
been
me.
we've been sitting here for a while, sitting on this exact topic, and for me, it's the Keon Ellis question. And we watched Keon Ellis come out last night against the Knicks, and boom, 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 starts hitting 3-point shots, and you're just like, okay, like
Mhm.
that's who the Kings need, right? And then you see Keon Ellis go out and he plays defense, and yeah, he's chirping at everybody. He's a guy who's never fouled anyone. Always has a shocked look on his face every time he's whistled. But still, it's a defensive intensity that the Kings need, and I think it brings us to a bigger question about like what is this audition for Keegan Murray? I mean, for Keon Ellis, what does it mean? What does it
Mm.
mean for the Kings going forward? And is he answering one of the questions that we've been asking the whole time? Like, what are they going to do this offseason?
It feels like for this iteration of the Kings, he has cemented himself as a starter.
I don't disagree.
On this iteration. Now, the question becomes if they add I'm just going to pick Nate. I'm just going to just bear with me here. If they go add a Paul George or something like that, where does Keon best fit in that lineup? And I think what he's shown over the course of the last couple of weeks, I think what he's shown is that he can kind of fit wherever. There's nights, hey, you need him to shoot it a few times, you feel good about that. Hey, he's going to always play defense. He's switchable enough that you feel good about him. Pretty much 1 through 3 for the most part, maybe some 4s depending, but mostly 1 through 3 you feel good about him. So I think he's kind of lineup proof. Now, is there a improved version of the Kings roster where maybe he's like a super sub kind of guy? Maybe. But I think for right now, going into next year, I don't know that there's a path to building a team where Keon Ellis is not starting.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kyle. So here's how you talk about the next iteration of the Kings.
Mhm.
I think you have to leave a door open, right? So the Kings have to improve. We all understand that. Like
Yeah.
the roster has to improve.
Yes.
And what you want to do is right now, without any question, that DeAaron Fox is your starting point guard and that Domantas Sabonis is your starting center. After that, it gets a little murky. You know that Keegan Murray is going to start at one of the 2 forward spots going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you improve the team? You can improve the team at the 2, you can improve the team at the 3, or you can improve the team at the 4. Now, you probably need to improve the team at all of those positions just because that's the way the game is.
Sure.
But the fact is, if you're going to go chase like a frontline guy, you have this opportunity because of Keegan's versatility that you can replace 1 or 2 of these positions. And that's kind of, where you're going to attack. So what I'm going to say is like, look, if a crazy frontline shooting guard becomes available, you don't pass on that because you've got Keegan Murray. I mean, because you've got Keon Ellis. I'm sorry, Keon Ellis. You don't pass on that player because of that. But I also think that if you're going to design your team after the Denver Nuggets, like we've talked about, right? If that's how we're designing this team, I think he can be a Kentavious Caldwell Pope.
Interesting.
And
I think so too.
I think that's who Keon Ellis is. He's that type of player. Maybe a little different, a little more, well, not as strong, but a little more versatile in his ability to defend 1s and 2s. And so I think that that's a good thing. But
no doubt.
Is that off the bench or is that as a starter? Do you lose Malik Monk? Do you not lose Malik Monk? Like, how is this team going to be built going forward?
I think you would have to be really, really good to supplant Keon Ellis as a starter.
Okay.
Like, I think we talk about the next version of the Kings. I don't think the upgrade is going to necessarily be there unless, they fall backwards into one via the draft or somebody undrafted who comes in and just tears it up. I don't think that upgrade is necessarily going to be there where we're sitting here in August and we're going, all right, hey, well, Keegan's coming off, or Keon's coming off the bench. I don't think that is there this year. I think what Keon Ellis has done has proven that he can play alongside DeAaron Fox. He works alongside Keegan Murray and with Domantas Sabonis. And that's all you need. If he is your fifth scoring option, you're in a really, really good spot. I think to remove him and what he gives you defensively and the energy he brings, to remove him from that starting unit at this point would require a major upgrade. And I don't necessarily think that major upgrade is there.
Well, that, and I also, from what I'm gathering, you don't believe that that Kevin Huerter is that major upgrade. Because Kevin Huerter is under contract for 2 years, and he's been your starting shooting guard for the last 2 years.
I would have a hard time going into next year after the way Keon Ellis has played and the metrics that they're surely looking at since he's come into the lineup. The offense hasn't tanked. Their defense has dramatically improved. Now, they'll have to weigh how much of that has been the NBA's officiating changes and this and that. But I think that a lot of it has to do with Keon Ellis and just kind of the energy that he brings and the switchability he brings and the matchup problems he creates for teams where they can't just say, all right, we're going to switch Jalen Brunson on to Kevin Huerter, and here's 50 from Brunson. Like that's just not a thing that they can go do. So I think you'd have a really, really hard time putting Kevin Huerter back in the starting lineup if it's me. And maybe that means that you're moving Huerter even if you don't want to. Because if the Kings come to him and say like, hey, you're going to come off the bench, and he's like, well, then I don't want to do that. He could start somewhere. It may be for this team. Maybe the Kings like him more than they like Keon and think that Keon off the bench is a better option. Mike Brown certainly did before Kevin Huerter got hurt.
Yeah.
But I personally would have a really difficult time right now being like, oh yeah, no, Kevin Huerter, once he's healthy, is just back in there.
Okay, so it's really tough because I know people are like, oh, you're overvaluing Keon Ellis, or like the comparison with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he's such a more refined player. Yeah, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's been in the league for a decade. Like, I'm not saying he's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope today, but that type of player. I mean, there have been multiple seasons, including this year and last year, where he averaged Kentavious Caldwell-Pope 10 points, 10.8 points. He had a 9.7. He had a 9.3 points per game, an 11.4. Like, we're not talking about him being the next, like, 16 to 18 point per game scorer at the shooting guard spot.
No, he's going to play good defense, and you worry about him in the corner.
He's a 3-and-D shooting guard. That's what I'm talking about. Keon Ellis is also 23 years old, and it is really his first official NBA season. He hasn't even played 82 games yet.
Yeah.
I don't know how many games he's played, but I guarantee you it's not 82 yet. I don't think. Maybe it's close, but like, look,
our fact checkers are on it.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, you have to give him an opportunity to grow into who he's going to be. But I think he's 67 games. I think the Kings have found
67.
Yeah, a diamond in the rough. And so, like, look, things need major upgrades, but I think having Keon Ellis gives you the opportunity to go attack other positions that are more positions of need at this point.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. And this is not to say they have a Hall of Famer on their hands here or something. It's just what this team needs, how they fit. We talked about this the other day. Keon Ellis is not a better player than Kevin Huerter.
Yeah.
If there was a draft of all the NBA players, Kevin Huerter would go before Keon Ellis. But when you look at what the Kings need specifically to pair with, that they have hitched their wagon to the DeAaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis pairing. Keegan Murray is a player that fits around those two players. That's why they drafted him and not Jaden Ivey. He fits better what they need with those two players anchoring their lineup. Keon Ellis, to me, fits better for what they need to be. And again, this is to level up. This is to become a better team. It's not that Kevin Huerter is bad. We saw it last year. They set records offensively with Kevin Huerter. They made the playoffs for the first time in 16 years with Kevin Huerter starting at shooting guard. He is a starting caliber NBA shooting guard, no doubt. Flat out, point blank, period. But maybe he's a starting caliber shooting guard on a team that can hide him a little better defensively, who doesn't need to follow me here. Domantas Sabonis is not a rim protector. We all know it.
Yep.
And it makes his life more difficult when you have your starting shooting guard who's getting blown by defensively.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where it is at this point.
Well, look, if you look around the league and the best teams, right? Just look at all of the best teams. So if we look at Minnesota, right? Who's number
Yes.
1 right now in the West.
Mhm.
Like, they have a player like Keon Ellis who's a couple of years ahead of Keon Ellis, but who is kind of what we're talking about in Jaden McDaniels.
He's also 6'9".
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the shooting guard version of,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because in your starting lineup, you need these players, right? And when you talk about Denver, they have Kentavious Caldwell Pope. You talk about OKC, they have Lou Dort. You talk about the Clippers, they have Terrence Mann. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about that guy. Even if you look at, like the Milwaukee Bucks have always had somebody like this, always. Like, I don't want to put it on like Bobby Portis, but they've always had like the defensive guys. And right now it's Jay Crowder, right? You bring Jay Crowder in when you need him. And it's kind of like around the league, you have to have these types of guys. You can't just have a bunch of scorers. And the second you change sort of the complexity for the Knicks, it's Josh Hart, who does so much more. I mean, Kings fans look at Josh Hart, they're like, man, that guy's a walking triple-double because he destroys you every time, right? But against normal teams, that's not what he does. He's just a really, really solid player who fills all the roles and does all the dirty work. That's what the Kings need. And so for me, I really like, we can look at the Miami Heat. Their entire team is literally like
just dirty work guys,
different versions of Keon Ellis.
Heat culture, baby.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's how they're built.
Is Jimmy Butler the Michael Jordan of Keon Ellis's?
Oh, see, now you're talking.
I think he might be.
I don't know. It's possible.
Yeah, no, I'm there, man. I think that Keon is a starter next year. And I think unless there is a massive two-way upgrade, like Zach LaVine is not it. Inserting Malik Monk into the starting lineup is not it. Keon Ellis, to me, is your starting two guard next year. And to me, I'd feel really, really good about that, given that he will now have a full offseason as a, hey, you're going to be the dude. And given his mindset on the court, I have a hard time believing he wouldn't attack that in the offseason in a way that allows him to come back better next year.
Yeah, not only are you going to be the dude, but we're going to bump you up. And now, like, he's worked with different player development coaches along the way. Like, maybe he gets an offseason with Leandro Barbosa. Maybe he gets an offseason with Doug Christie. Like, those are the next step where you're working with the guys who actually did it on the court at the NBA level, who can teach you the tricks of the trade and all that stuff. And so I think it's definitely a possibility where that's what Davion did 2 summers ago. Worked a lot with Doug. This last summer, Doug worked with Demonis. But like, if you bump up into the starting lineup, you might get one of these other coaches that are, and this isn't to disparage the guys that are bringing these guys along, but now you're talking about an NBA version of the coach that is on the floor with you, teaching you, again, finer nuances of what this means at the NBA level and how we work through this.
Right. How to draw contact, how to avoid it when offensive players do try and draw contact. All these like little tiny things that come along with being a really effective NBA player. Yeah, I think Keon's there.